We all consider ourselves the class of '92, because that was like right kind of. That was when that kind of whole independent thing exploded. Was kind of that year. It'd been building and building, and the explosion happened that year.
I think the year in which it became clear that the independent cinema can and does offer alternative to mainstream Hollywood cinema is 1992. Not only in terms of Sundance, but in terms of quantity. There was funding, there was more finance, there was excitement. There were new companies around that specialized in distributing independent films, and there were new audiences that were craving to see something more intelligent, more provocative than typical actioner or popcorn movie that came from the studio system.
When I look back at Sundance Film Festival in 1992 and think of the films that are there, there's Alexander Rockwell's In the Soup, which won the big prize. There was Allison Anders' Gas, Food, and Lodging.
The Living End from Greg Araki.
There was Derek Jarman's Edward II.
Reservoir Dogs.
Cache Rubin's Poison Ivy.
Swoon by Tom Cullen.
There was Neil Jimenez and Michael Steinberg's The Water Dance.
The Hour and Times by Christopher Munch.
There was Anthony Drazen's Zebrahead. And there were also, significantly to me, a retrospective Stanley Kubrick, which is great in regard to Quentin.
And the other thing that you have to know about Sundance is everyone's totally stoned on the fact that the air is so thin and you're up so high. And it's an experience like you lose your mind. You go from movie to movie and you kind of don't register the fact that you aren't in your mind because the air is very thin. And so you're having all these incredibly peak experiences. And of course the films that work at Sundance are the films, for that reason, that get your adrenaline up. It's like the alternative to going out and skiing. You go see one of these movies, and that's how you cope with the climate.
Sundance at that stage to me seemed like, this is funny to think of now, but Sundance seemed slightly corporate or something. It was an organized feature-length film festival. It was the establishment, and Sundance in 1992 was, worlds away from what Sundance is now in terms of just its organization and the scale.
So the interesting exercise for me is to look at those movies that I saw back in my 1992 Sundance experience and think, was Reservoir Dogs the only big news that came out of there?
Well, it's funny about the competition, because when I went there, I certainly didn't, the thought of winning never even occurred to me. But the buzz was really heavy, and it was all about that it was between Reservoir Dogs or Poison Ivy who was going to win.
Every filmmaker that I talked to or something was always coming up, because I was like the high-profile movie there, was coming up to me and just saying, hey, so I hear it's you and me up for the big award, all right? I had like 8 different filmmakers, so I hear it's between us.
I had no idea that it would ever win a prize. I thought Reservoir Dogs was going to win a prize. I thought that was, everyone was talking, the buzz was. See, we came in kind of blind. No one knew our film.
The way that Sundance works is that there are various categories. There are 2 competition categories, fiction and doc, and Reservoir Dogs was actually shown in competition.
I wasn't really in competition for fucking anything as far as the jury was concerned, okay?
I remember the night of the awards, someone asking me to sit in the front row, and I was so stupid at the time, I had no idea what that meant. I was like, sit in the front row next to Faye Dunaway. It's like, I remember seeing her in movies. Like, why don't I sit next to Faye Dunaway?
And basically, after basically getting my dick blown for 2 weeks straight about, you're the movie, you're the shit, all right? I don't win jack fucking shit.
Of course, we were both shut out, I think. I think Quentin was shut out also. I know that I was completely.
Well, Quentin, you didn't need our award. You're set. Your career was set. Your talent was there. Hollywood's knocking at your door. You don't need us. And I'm like, what the fuck does that have to do with anything? We wanted to give Water Dance the screenplay because of that whole impotency thing. We wanted to give Swoon best cinematography because we wanted to support black and white. The one special award that we were up for the consideration for was for my editor, Sally. All right, best editor. All right, that was the one because she was female. That was the one that they would have given Reservoir Dogs. Okay, we're gonna support like the chick doing the dude movie. All right, but ultimately they decided that Seymour Cassell was far worthier. All right.
And then Seymour got a Best Actor prize, a special jury prize, and I thought that's what it was. Great, it was, in the soup.
The one they really all agreed on was Hour in the Times. They wanted to give that grand prize, but it was only an hour long, so they could only give it a special prize. But they could all agree on In the Soup. So that's how that went.
If you follow that logic, just turns the prizes and the juries into this kind of charity event. We'll give it to some dull but worthy, needy film.
And look, I wasn't the only guy that went on to have a big, went on to really make a name for himself in independence. And Gregor Rocky win shit that year, all right? And then we all proceeded to go to festivals all around the world and win shit and create a name for ourselves. For the next 3 years, we were the closest equivalent America had to the French New Wave. I always said, well, we're not as good, but not all of us anyway.
I went back last year to Sundance, and I was up there. I hadn't been there since In the Soup, and it just has become such a show-busy kind of, con in the mountains, and it's all about agents and bullshit and people bidding wars and power trips and, Mariah Carey, on Main Street wearing some skimpy outfit in sub-zero weather, It was like, what the fuck, this is Sundance?
When I think of the Sundance Film Festival and I think of the year '92, which is when I was first there, I think that a lot of the programming changed after that as a reflection of simply the types of films that were being made and who was making them. And in a way, the stakes changed also because everybody was obviously looking to have very commercially successful films and to use Sundance as a launching place for them.
Every good thing has an arc, and I think it's time for something new like Slam Dance or Slam Dunk or one of these other film festivals to kind of start the new thing, because it's becoming, when you have Mariah Carey's movie in competition at Sundance, there's something, and when you have Jeff Gilmore standing, not to say anything bad about Jeff, but to have Jeff Gilmore stand up and say how honored he is to have Mariah Carey there, something's rotten in Denmark. Something doesn't smell so good anymore.
Are you rolling? Yeah, we're rolling. Okay.
Who shot Nice Guy Eddie? Do you want to see? Want to get the payoff?
Yeah.
Because on the back of the shirt it has the payoff.
Go ahead, do it.
Okay, because in the back it's got the answer. All right, we'll do that at the end.
We'll say that for the end.
All right. In the Soup is about a young filmmaker who's living in New York on the Lower East Side at kind of a very intense time around here. And he meets a gangster. He's selling everything he has, and through a want ad in the newspaper, he sells this 700-page and 100-pound script. And the guy buys it and decides to make his film. So it's their adventures of this guy Joe teaching this young filmmaker the ways of life, kind of, It's a coming-of-age movie. We actually started shooting, and we had to rip all the sets down because the financing fell through after the first 3 days. So there's a scene in the Soup where Jennifer Beals is spinning around on the roof and Steve Buscemi's shooting her with a movie camera in the snow. It's one of my favorite scenes. I shot that scene when we had the first financing. I ran up to the roof because it was snowing, and we were testing the cameras and stuff. I said, it's snowing, let's run up to the roof. So we went up and shot it. And that's what I actually love about independent filmmaking, because you can do shit like that, whereas in Hollywood now it's like charge, and you hear this rumble, the unions get motivated, they're 3 days late, where's the fight? But in those days you could work really quick and fast, and we went up and shot that, and then the financing fell through. Answer to your question though, is in the end of the day it was about $900,000, but it was a budget that was inventing itself as it went. I think we made a mistake. If we had to do the whole thing all over again, a lot of people were interested right after the film won the prize, and I think Jim Stark and I primarily Jim Stark kind of stepped back and said, let them all kind of fight it out and come up with the best offer. Came back about a month later, and there really wasn't such a great offer anymore on the table because he didn't strike while the iron was hot. Now people are really smart about that. They make this bidding war, and they don't leave a hotel room until they get the highest bidder, It's interesting because my perspective on independent film right now is that it's really hard. I mean, it was hard before, but there were at least airplanes dropping rations once in a while from Europe. And the thing is that in Europe you could get European television or French television or German television to kind of give you $100,000 in a pre-sale. That's how In the Soup was put together. Jim Stark went out and pre-sold territories. I really don't think you can do that anymore. A film that can be made for a modest amount of money, that can make its money back and maybe a little more, is not of interest to many people anymore. They're the Reservoir Dogs barking in the background, coming to get us. But that's kind of who I am. I'm a marginal filmmaker. I like making marginal movies. It's kind of like where I'm at. It's like small novels, or that's what I want to do. I don't want to make a blockbuster. I mean, hey, if a film's a blockbuster, great, But I'm not interested in making a film to have a result. I'm interested in making a good story, and hopefully people come to it. And it's a surprise, like In the Soup. But now more and more, I think it's getting harder for independent filmmakers because they have to make something that's going to work in the marketplace, much more so. So thank you, Quentin. I'll talk about your films anytime you want.
I guess wait for this track. Sorry, I'll just wait for it to pass. I think somebody's coming down. Oh, hi, George. This is Mark. George, he just had to shoot a short interview with me. The Hours and Times I shot in 1988 in Spain and England, and when I made it, I really didn't have a sense that it would be shown publicly at all or seen at film festivals. So when it was accepted to the Sundance Festival in 1992, it was kind of heartening that people did have a chance to see it, and it was especially heartening, I think, that the festival that particular year was a good one in the sense that many really interesting filmmakers sort of presented their first work or some of their best work in any case. People like Allison Anders and Alex Rockwell and Quentin Tarantino and Greg Araki, Tom Kalin were all there that year. So it was kind of a privilege to have been part of such a good group. I guess one of the things that's more eccentric or even uncommercial about The Hours and Times is its length and the fact that it runs only 60 minutes. This was not something that I ever really thought about while I was making the film because it seemed like the appropriate length for the story, and I never really thought very much about the commercial repercussions of that because I didn't think that the film would be seen commercially at all. In addition to the fact that it was photographed in black and white, these were sort of formidable obstacles in releasing it theatrically because we generally don't see theatrical films that are scaled at 60 minutes. And yet so many of the films that we see would benefit by being treated at that length rather than forcing themselves to be a full-length feature. So I was very pleased that Alberto Garcia, who was running the competition at Sundance that year, programmed it despite the fact that their rules, I think, normally called for a film to be 70 minutes in length in order to be in competition. The advice that I would give to a filmmaker starting out today would be obviously to have something to say that's worth saying, but apart from that, to do it in a way that's comfortable to that person, not necessarily to use the production models that are held up as standard, but to find your own production model and to do it in a way that allows you to really bring out the most that's inherent in what it is you've written, to shoot it for however long or however little time is necessary, to do it in whatever gauge or whatever medium is most suited to it, and not simply to make these decisions simply because it's fashionable now to shoot films in digital video.
Any regrets?
No. I have no regrets about the films that I've made or the way in which I've made them. Like everybody, I'm still hoping to make some inroads in the commercial cinema, but only with the stuff that is important to me and to which I can bring some sort of voice.
Bob Shea had read some reviews about my Roger Corman movies, and he had called us into New Line to meet because he wanted to do something. And Sarah Risher there put us together with Peter Morgan and Melissa Gilbert, who had this idea that was kind of loosely based on Melissa's life, where this girlfriend came into her life and really just wreaked havoc on her family. And I love that idea. Well, to me, it wasn't really a genre picture. It wasn't even a thriller. It was really a movie about the friendship between two girls and the betrayal. What Sundance did for Poison Ivy was, I think it really legitimized it, because the distributors at New Line really did not get this movie, and they would have liked to have seen it just disappear. They did not understand the relationship between the girls. They didn't understand that this movie really had some depth and really had something to say. And you know, they made 60 prints of it and thought it would just completely go away. So I think that being at Sundance really showed them there was something special here, even though they still didn't get it. They still didn't make any more prints, but it made a difference, you know? I really think it did. And then the audience reaction was really good. I mean, it was huge. They only made 60 prints and theaters were packed. People perceived a division between what they would classify as an independent film and a film that was more studio friendly or would get the attention of the studios more. And I think that Poison Ivy fell into that class, and probably Reservoir Dogs did too. Some of the movies with the most depth people have called exploitation movies. And you know, I really don't like that. To make a dividing line between what is, you know, worthy and what is art and what is exploitation is very presumptuous. And that's something you get right under my craw with that one, because I think that certainly the movies I've made and movies Quentin has made, you know, have had tremendous depth to them. You can watch them over and over again and find new things in them that you didn't see before. This coming from the director who shot Carrie 2, where a guy, you know, gets shot in the crotch with a spear gun and his penis goes into the pool. So I walk out, I mean, I can't stand the guy's ear getting cut off, but in Streets, I have a guy who like gets a gun shoved up his butt and gets killed this way, you know? So it's so funny. It's like the stuff I can shoot is so much worse than the stuff I can watch. But that shows how, you know what? I think it shows how effective Quentin's directing was. Because, man, I could not take, I'm trying to move around here. I couldn't take it. It was so intense. A lot of times the movies that I think are really important aren't easy. They don't go down easy. You know, I think that they're movies that really are often very provocative and they're very hard to take. But they have something to say, and, you know, they hit you in a place, in a very, you know, visceral kind of place.
I'm from the art world. I never expected to be a feature film director. I never expected really to have the career I ended up having. And I think that is very much reflected in Swoon. I mean, I was watching avant-garde experimental films. I was watching Warhol films. I was watching all that kind of stuff. Swoon tells the story of Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, two 18-year-old intellectual Jewish boys from the south side of Chicago who decided to create what they thought was the perfect crime. They murdered a 13-year-old boy that they knew, not well. He was an acquaintance, for no apparent reason, and it became known as the crime of the century in 1924. It was one of, my mother actually grew up in Chicago. My mother is in her 80s, and for her, I think the Leopold and Loeb case was like the Manson case was maybe for me growing up. It was this unbelievable, incomprehensible crime that was just horrific because it was random, because any child could be plucked off the street and killed. And it became an interesting case, I think, in terms of discussion of criminality and Jewishness and all that stuff in the court case. One of the interesting things about Swoon, it was before the proliferation of the Avid, and so we couldn't afford what was then a very expensive technology, and we cut on 3/4-inch video. That was how the film was completed, but it was working on linear video editing. Yeah, and Ellen Kuras, who shot Swoon, her background, she had mainly done photography. Both of us had done a ton of black and white photography. We didn't have money to see the dailies on the movie, so we shot black and white Polaroids for the whole film as dailies, and because of our shared photographic experience, it was really actually an incredible benefit, because we could say, okay, that's f5.6, let's close down a stop, or let's give some more fill light or whatever, and judge what the image really looked like in large part by those Polaroids, which is amazing when I think back on that. During that period of time, we all said something like the budget was the aesthetic. You had embraced the low-budget aspect of it, and that led to the look of the film. So, Swoon, I couldn't rent many period cars. I had one 1924 car. I made that car stand in for all the cars I couldn't use. Or if you look at somebody like Chris Munch, who had a film that year, The Hours and the Times, that film is incredibly, it's like a testament to working in an economical mode. He basically went to Spain, rented a hotel room, and pretty much made the movie with very few people around him. And it's an incredibly beautiful, lyrical film that, cuts to the quick of its subject matter. Really manages to conjure somebody like, John Lennon in a way that's remarkable for the scale of the film. I did think it was funny, actually. I think Greg Araki was included in this article. Sight and Sound in the early 90s, Amy Taubin wrote an article called The Sons of Scorsese, and I'm in that article, and Quentin's in that article, and Greg Araki's in that article. And again, I think it's kind of funny now, because, so we bludgeoned a 13-year-old kid to death in Swoon, but it has very little to do with Reservoir Dogs or The Living End. Sure, I'm interested in violence in film. Many of my films have violence as an element of the story or the plot in them. It's a little kind of crazy that people think that there's such a kind of direct correlation between those films. I can look at Greg's work or Quentin's work or my own work or Todd Haynes' work or any of the people we've mentioned and see very distinct voices. I'm pretty stubborn about the kind of movies I want to make. I'm interested in certain things, and I want to make those movies. Don't get me wrong, I want to direct as many feature films of the subject matter that I want to direct as I can do in a lifetime. I've had a certain amount of misfortune in terms of, I think most people, developing films that don't happen. And the great thing for me is that having been able to produce and direct and also then direct short work and have that short work show in a sort of maybe more art world context and have support there has allowed me to switch hats in a way that I don't think a lot of people have been able to do. I've been able to keep balls in the air, and that's been really great. The film I'm developing now, Savage Grace, is a fairly expensive art movie. For me, it might be one of the bigger films I would ever direct in terms of the scale of it and the amount of money that it's going to take to do. So I think I'm lucky and fortunate to be around, to be sort of in that context of people who are working.
We were the most notorious film of the festival. All right, it's once we had a crazy first screening. That was one of the best or worst screenings you could possibly have. It's the first time I've ever shown him, one of my movies to a complete random audience. So we show up at Sundance, and we shot the film in scope. All right, and we get there, and then Alberto Garcia comes up and says, "You know what? We thought we had a scope lens for the projector, and we don't." All right, now I now know enough, and I wouldn't well, then we're not screening the movie. All right, that would be the first things out of my mouth. But then I didn't know enough to say that, or even didn't know I could say that, all right? So we watched the movie, we watched my scope movie with a non-scope lens in the projector. And that's where so the first paying audience is seeing it that way. This side is out of focus, this side is spilling off the screen, and it's just a nightmare. All right, but the place is jam-packed. During the last section in the warehouse, all right, it's going on, that the recriminations, they shoot Kirk balls and everything, and all of a sudden, the lights start coming up. What the hell is going on with this? And somebody oh shit, all right, and they're bringing the lights down during this big sequence. Then the guns get pulled, all right? So everybody's got their guns on everybody else. And right at that moment, a power failure happens. All right, and just poof, the projector, the screen goes black, the theater goes black. My editor, Sally Minky, was just practically in tears, all right? And at some level, I was like, don't worry about it, Sally. It was just going so bad that I just had to get into the masochistic thrill of the whole thing. It was funny because it was one of those weird things where that was either the worst time in the world to have that happen in the movie or the best, all right? Because the audience just went, ah! They get the power back up, they turn the generators on and everything, and then they start the film again. We have our next screening of the movie. All right, and we had 4 screenings altogether. Okay, the next screening during that week happens, and no incidents. Then they have this special Salt Lake City screening of the movie, and so I go to, because they have a annex festival going on in Salt Lake City. So I go, hey, maybe that's the one to invite my mom to. Not all this bullshit going on over here. So my mom and some friends come over. There they have a scope lens, but it's a shitty scope lens. I mean, just a really crappy scope lens, all right? So if it's in close-up, you're fine, okay? Anything that's a wide shot, which, there's a couple of those in Reservoir Dogs, all right? Soft. At some point in the film, about midpoint in the film, this one thing, if you've grown up your whole life going to movies, that you've seen happen every once in a while, but you know it as soon as you see it, all right? Watching the movie's going through the projector, watching it, flicker, and then all of a sudden, a frame gets stuck. And you get that beat. 1, 2, burn! And I can't believe it. I go, you know what? I would bet that 85% of all the directors who've ever lived have never had to watch their movie burn on screen. 3rd time my movie shows, I get that cigarette burn effect. I go, fuck me. It's the big screening at Sundance at the Egyptian, all right, which is their big theater, but it's not even really a theater. It's a moose lodge that they've converted into a theater. That's the big industry screening. Faye Dunaway's in the audience, all right. In the question and answer session, Faye Dunaway asked me a question, all right. Everybody from Hollywood had invaded by that time, all right, and so they're all there, and it's well, I had a horrible screening, okay screening, horrible screening. So I guess this is this falling, but I really turn it into a whole thing, just like I just did right now, but a little funnier and a little tighter. I described all the experiences that I'd had at Sundance in my introduction to the movie, all right, with the sheer intention of scaring the shit out of the projectionist. Don't let a fucking thing happen to this screening, all right? And then it went over fantastic, all right? And so all those other screenings were forgotten.